everyone, and welcome to YarnGasm. I'm KRISTIN, and this is episode 206. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back, and if you are a new viewer, thanks so much for checking out the podcast. This is a podcast about knitting, spinning, hand-dyeing yarn, sewing, and making all those things in Brooklyn, New York, where I'm from and I live, and as always, I'm just really happy that you're taking some time out of your day to chat about those things with me. So a little bit before, I can talk today, I promise. I've got this. Just a couple of announcements before I get into what I've been making. As always, you can find show notes over at yarngasmpodcast.com. So anything that I talk about, you can find a whole running list of things per episode there. If you would like to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active, at Voolenvine. Also Voolenvine on Ravelry. And speaking of Ravelry, if you have not joined the YarnGasm Ravelry group, you should totally hop on over there and join the group. Lots of awesome conversation happening over there, and it's the place to be if you want to join in on the knit-alongs that we're having on the podcast. A place to go to share your finished objects, your works in progress, and just general chatter. But I also just want to give a quick shout out to Sharon, who is the host of the podcast formerly known as the TV Knitting Podcast. She has renamed her podcast to the Knit Style Podcast, so definitely check it out if you haven't already. Sharon, I've known Sharon for a while now. We're really good friends, and I could not be more excited for her, even more so now because she's just started dyeing yarn and she's opened shop on Etsy, and like her podcast, it's called Knit Style Yarns as well. So do hop over there. I may have treated myself to a skein when she started selling yarn this past week, so it was just really too pretty to pass up. But yes, down bar I will link to where you can find her info and her shop. So congrats again, Sharon. I'm super excited for you. Yeah, so definitely check that out. So yes, okay, I think that's it for announcements. I'm going to be moving along to what I've been making. I don't have any finished objects this week. I know I had one last week, but this week, not so much. But I thought I would have a finished pair of socks for you guys, but it just wasn't in the cards. But I will say I have been knitting quite a lot this past week, even more than sewing, believe it or not, which is crazy. I guess it's kind of because the weather is, autumn is nigh, guys. It's coming, and I cannot, I hate to say this, but I cannot be more ready for autumn. It's just been one hell of a heat wave that we've been having here on the East Coast, so I am more than ready for cooler weather, and I think the knitting is that's getting me really excited about knitting now. So, but as I shared with you last week, I started swatching for my Rhinebeck sweater, in which I am knitting the RECOLETA cardigan by LOCATELLI, and it is living in my, along with another project that I have in here, but I haven't touched in a while, so I won't talk about it, but in my Alex Collins project bag, which, by the way, congrats Alex, she just relaunched her website. It's brand spanking new, and to celebrate, she is offering the YarnGasm podcast a 10% discount on her handmade items. And yeah, so just pop on over to her shop and enter the code Voolenvine, and you will get 10% off on all of the stuff in her shop, which is awesome because I really love this bag, guys. It's been getting a lot of use this summer, so I cannot speak more highly of it. But yeah, anyway, living in my project bag is my RECOLETA cardigan, which, as I mentioned, is going to be my Rhinebeck sweater, and I'm loving this so much, you guys. It's just coming together so beautifully. So it started at the neckline, and then it's really just, the construction of it is unlike anything I've ever knit before. It's kind of like the whole construction of it reminds me of the Pomme de Pin cardigan, which is a cardigan that I knit a while ago, I think like 3 or 4 years ago, by Amy Christophers. But the way it's knit up is completely different. It's you start off with the neckband, and then once you have that, you pick up the stitches and then start knitting the sleeves and the back and everything. So it's really clever the way LOCATELLI designed this. And as you can see, yeah, this is the neckband, and then over here is where you pick up the stitches to start knitting the back and the sleeves. So yeah, you can see this, the sleeves start to shape over here. If we can get that to focus, there we go. So you can see the sleeves starting to shape over here. And the yarn is my hand-dyed yarn, Voolenvine yarns, on my SMITTEN DK base, which is a merino nylon cashmere 4-ply blend, and it is very soft, you guys. I love knitting with this. And because the cooler weather is coming up, I'm going to start dyeing more yarn on my DK base, so yay! But yeah, it's just coming together really well. I'm enjoying this knit. It seems when knitting this, you have to follow 2 lace charts simultaneously, but honestly, I am having no trouble doing that. When you get into a rhythm of it. It's very similar. If you've knit the Stonecutter sweater before by Michelle Wong, it has a very similar, not as intense, but it kind of follows the same rhythm of knitting, if that makes any sense, where you're following 2 charts at the same time. But the charts are very, I won't say intuitive, I have to keep an eye on what I'm doing, but I'm at the point where when I'm following a lace chart, I can just stare at the chart and knit without looking at what I'm actually knitting. Because it's kind of like sock knitting, where if you can just knit stockinette round and round without looking, I can actually, believe it or not, I can actually do that while knitting lace, because I can feel what's the next stitch that's coming up. So I'm really glad that I can do that, because that's just making this go a lot more smoothly than I would have expected. So yeah, so that's one project coming up, and I'm trying to do a little bit at a time a day, maybe like 10 rows at most, or at least, I don't know. Well, I've been listening to an audiobook while knitting on this, so I'll talk about that in Blather a little more, but yeah, it's just been making it really easy to get some knitting done on this. So I highly recommend, like, if you are interested in knitting this, pop on an audiobook and just have at it. But yeah, and I'm using and the pattern does call for worsted weight wool, but and I'm using DK weight, and I got the gauge using the needle size that the pattern actually calls for, and I did a swatch and everything, so fingers crossed it'll all match up and everything will just go according to plan. So yes, so that is living in there. The other thing that I am working on is, I announced it on Instagram this past week, but I was chatting with Lara from the Dyer's Notebook podcast, and we decided to co-host a knit along. I know, I'm kind of like drowning in knit-alongs right now, but I'm embracing it, because why not? But yeah, we both agreed that, we should co-host a knit-along together, and we've both been wanting to knit the Exploration Station shawl for quite some time, so we're doing it. We're co-hosting a knit-along for the Exploration Station pattern, which is a pattern by Stephen West. So the knit-along kicks off today, September 1st, and goes all the way until October 31st. So if you want to join, feel free to join. I have started a thread in the YarnGasm Ravelry group, and Lara has started a thread in the Dyer's Notebook podcast Ravelry group, so feel free to double dip. It's highly encouraged, and yeah, I can't wait to see all of your exploration stations that you are going to knit up, and again, a lot of people are super excited about it, so yay. And I may have cheated a little bit. I actually cast on yesterday just because I was curious. I'm not winning any prizes, guys, so I think the fact that I cast on yesterday is, I'm letting myself slide. So you guys can yell at me, go for it. But anyway, I'm just gonna kind of let that go quietly into the night. But anyway, I got a little antsy because I caked up all my yarn, and I wasn't sure how certain colorways would play together, and I did one version of it and I didn't like it. Just knitting a couple of wedges together, and then I was like, nah, I think I like these colorways together. But I got a little ways through. I think I'm on the third wedge right now. But here's what I have so far. And yeah, this is my hand-dyed yarn. This is Jilted Rose, which is kind of like a tonal pink, and then I have, again, Taiga, which is what I'm knitting my LOCATELLI RECOLETA cardigan out of, and then I have some Black Pearl, and then I have Dirty on Purpose. So, and it's all on my blitzed base because it only makes sense to knit. For me, I want an exploration station that has glitter in it, so this is my sparkle base.
So yeah, and I really like the way this is knitting up, and it's just, you know, right now it's just easy back and forth short rows. And some people were asking me like whether or not I consider it an easy pattern, like is it suitable for beginners, or is it kind of like middle of the road, advanced? I would say I consider it like an intermediate pattern. Like if you are comfortable knitting, purling, yarning over, I'd say with like a little bit of wiggle room for learning some new techniques, such as like an I-cord edging, which once you get the gist of it, it's super easy, and short rows, which are pretty much no-brainers. And I know there are a couple of rows of brioche in here. I have never knit brioche before, so this will be a first for me. I'm actually going to knit a little swatch on the side before I get to that part, so when I do get to that part, I know what I'm doing. So I would say, you know, if you're an adventurous beginner, this might be this might be a great pattern for you to try. I'm excited to learn brioche because it's been pretty much all the rage lately. But yeah, I say give it a go, and especially because it's a knit along, you can just join in the chatter, and you know, we can all help each other out, you know, if we have questions or what have you. And I will say that the pattern is extremely clear. Stephen West did a great job explaining everything. You feel like he's holding your hand throughout the entire thing, explaining, you know, all the like parts that could seem a little fuzzy, but he does a really good job explaining it. And he also posts links to tutorials like for the cast on and a couple of other, you know, areas of the pattern. So yeah, you know, I'm having fun so far, and again, super excited for this this knit along because I've been wanting to knit this for a while. So yay, awesome. So yeah, that is another thing that is on my needles, and that's pretty much what I've been working on this past week. Just kind of being a monogamous knitter this past week, so very excited about that. So moving along to stash acquisitions, because I've been naughty again and I made a yarn purchase. I was chatting with Gabby from the Once Upon a Corgi podcast, and actually I was watching one of her podcasts. I think it was a couple, maybe like 3 episodes ago, but she had dyed up this one colorway and it spoke to me like nobody's business. She showed it off on the podcast. If you are not familiar with the Stuff Mom Never Told You podcast, it is awesome. It's an audio only podcast, and I listen to it a lot while I'm, you know, dyeing yarn and working. They just talk about a lot of well, first of all, it's hosted by KRISTIN and Caroline, and it's primarily a feminist podcast, but it's very lighthearted and they joke around a lot, and you know, but it's incredibly informative. You know, it touches on so many different topics, you know, pertaining to women, and you know, I love it. So if you haven't checked it out, highly recommend it. But Gabby has also been listening to the podcast also, and they had one episode on librarians where they talk about the history of librarians and where you know, librarianship is going. And one of the hosts said, you know, whenever she says libraries, she always wants to say libraries. And they were joking around and they said that would be an awesome cocktail, like libraries, you know. And of course, Gabby, the awesome genius that she is, came up with a libraries colorway. 2 versions of it. She has volume 1 and volume 2, and I fell in love with volume 1. And I nabbed a skein because I just had to have it. It just made me laugh, and I love the colorway. So here it is. Libraries. Here's her logo, and then here's the colorway. It's just so awesome. It's purple and like a light green, like very muted tones of dark purple and like a sea green, and just speckled, and it sparkles, of course, like gold sparkles, Delina. And she also included a recipe for a libraries cocktail, which I may have to whip up this weekend. So thank you so much, Gabby. I really, really love the way this turned out. And I'll post a link to her shop in the down bar in the show notes, where you can find her stuff, because yeah, it's awesome. I might just have to cast this on soonly. So yeah, we'll see. So that's it. I only bought one thing this week. Well, yeah, the other thing I bought from the Knit Style yarn. So that's coming today. It should come today or tomorrow, I don't know, but anyway, I will show it off on the next podcast. But yes, moving along, I guess I'll chat about sewing. What I'm wearing today is not hand sewn, it's not handmade. I purchased it at Target, go figure. Guys, I am very hyper today. I had a ginormous cup of coffee this morning, Dennis surprised me with a bag of Dunkin' Donuts chocolate glazed donut, my weakness, and I just could not resist. So I had a big cup of it this morning, and now I'm just ready to seize the day, apparently. So anyway, sewing. Yeah, I posted about this yesterday and this morning. I finished my first bra, you guys. How awesome is that? And I will show it to you in a second, but little precursor. So Maria from the Stitch in Sweden podcast, which I talked about on several episodes, but she is just on a bra making frenzy. She's just dived into the rabbit hole, and I feel like every other post she posts on Instagram or every episode of her podcast, she shows off a plethora of bras that she has made for herself, and I was just, you know, blown away by it, and I'm just like, I wanted to do that too. So she totally enabled me, and I will say she enabled Jacqueline from the Brooklyn Knit Vogue podcast. So me and Jacqueline are kind of joining, not, you know, we're not doing a bra along or anything like that, but, you know, we were talking about it. We're like, how cool it would be just to make bras. So yeah, we're both diving down the rabbit hole of bra making as well, and yeah, so basically I'm starting to dive into bra making as well, and the first attempt didn't go so well. The second attempt, not so much. The third attempt, we're getting there. But I will show you first my first foray into bra making. Just a bunch of silly mistakes on my part. Just a little, because I'm working with like stretch fabrics and lace, and it's quite fiddly. So, but this is the first attempt at bra making. It did not go as well as I planned, obviously, because it's not, you can tell because it's not finished. I think my downfall with this one was where it came time to insert the underwire channels. And this is the Marlboro pattern from orangelingerie.com, linked down in the down bar. And again, I don't follow directions very well, but I probably should have read through everything first, but I got very seam trimming happy, and I trimmed the seam of where the underwire is supposed to be installed, or the channel is supposed to be installed. But then as I read the next directions, it's like, oh, now when it comes to installing the underwire, yeah, just sew it to the seam allowance under the cups. And I was like, oh wait, I trimmed that, and I tried my best to just work with what I had, and it just wasn't happening. And then I realized that I sewed the channel on the wrong, you know, on the wrong side, and I tried to seam rip it, and it was just no. So then the second one, I had enough fabric left over to cut out a second round of pieces, and as you can see here, I didn't have enough fabric for the band, so I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna let that one slide. It's just a first attempt. And so we have the underwire, but then it came to the cups, and I realized I sewed this wrong side of the cup to the wrong side of this piece right here. So it was a disaster, you could say. So I'm just quietly letting that one go into the, I'm quietly letting it go into the night, shoving it under the rug. It never happened. No one has to know that, yeah, don't tell anyone. So I actually panic ordered another kit of the same fabric from the same site. I actually purchased these from tailormadeshop.com, and again, show notes for linkage, but it came in the mail today, so I have that ready to go. But in the meantime, I whipped up another bra, not the same pattern, the Marlboro pattern, but the Watson bra from, what is it, clothhabit.com. And it's a bra that does not have an underwire. It's considered a soft bra, so it's kind of, the way the pattern is described, it's kind of, you know, it has like a long bodice to it and then no underwire, so you can just kind of wear it to lounge around, or, you know, whatever. It doesn't have much support under it, so it's just kind of like a lounge bra, so to speak. So I made one, you guys. It's done, and I posted about it on Instagram, so you can see the finished object there. I am not going to model this for you guys. I'm pretty sure you can understand why, but Margot back there, she modeled it very wonderfully on Instagram, so you can check her out there. But yeah, it is done, and I cannot be more happy with the way this turned out. Granted, there was some seam ripping, there was some swearing when it came to making this, because yeah, just again, silly little mistakes, fiddling with
very delicate fabrics. I did line it. You can see the inside. It's not perfect, but I did follow, I know Maria said there was a tutorial on how to, what do you call it, enclose the seams on the inside so it doesn't look like, well, I did it for certain seams, but not for the underwire. I don't know why, I just didn't do it for here. I just couldn't really wrap my brain around it at the time. But for here, the cup, you can see where I enclosed the seams. Honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say this is a 5, and like the perfect pattern for a beginner, I would say. And I actually did have to alter the pattern a little bit because I used a scalloped edge lace, and there is a tutorial on the Cloth Habit website where she shows you how to alter the pattern, because generally the original pattern is designed simply for like a jersey or non-scalloped lace edge, but she shows you how to alter it, you know, and how to place it on the how to place the pattern piece on the fabric, so you get like, you can accommodate like this really pretty lace edging. So yay, very happy with that. Yeah, there are a couple of things that I could have done a little neater, but again, for first attempt, I'm very proud of myself. And I will say I'm not in love with the process yet, but I'm not giving up. I'm going to make the Marlboro bra and, you know, just kind of dip my toes a little, see how much I like it. But yeah, otherwise having a lot of fun, you know, just like learning new techniques, and yay, awesome. So, oh, and I just want to say, Maria, thank you for totally enabling me. It's definitely something I would have never considered ever diving into. So yay, awesome. And the next thing that I want to talk about is the Victorian make-along that I'm co-hosting with Benjamin Crudwig from the Design Time podcast, where we are making all things Victorian. You can knit something, crochet something, sew something, just of or relating to Victorian times. And as I mentioned, I have taken the crafty class on making corsets, and I'm slowly gathering my materials. The make-along actually kicks off today as well, September 1st, and goes all the way until October 31st. And yeah, just again, I'm slowly gathering my materials, and once I have it all together, I'm gonna dive headlong into corset making. So the pattern that Alison Smith suggests using for the craftsy class is a gorgeous pattern. I was going to buy it, but I would have to pay shipping from the UK, and it would take a while for it to get here. So I kind of made an executive decision to actually just purchase a pattern locally, and I actually got another awesome sale from Butterick. The patterns again were $2.50. You could not beat that. So I purchased 2 corset patterns from there, and here they are. I'm reading these backwards, so yeah, one is Butterick, this one right here, B5935, and then this one, B4254. And I think I'm gonna hold off on making any of these, but I just got it because why not? But I think I'm going to be making view C from here, which is this one. It seems fairly simple to make, and even though I would really love to make this one right here, it kind of reminds me of something that Claire from Outlander would wear. So it has like all these stays and everything, and it's just so pretty. But I think we'll start simple and go with this one. So it has a busk, and yeah, it's just pretty straightforward, it seems like. So the fabric that Alison Smith recommends in the class is to use Cotil, and I've never worked with it, but it's kind of like canvas, but I believe this is what they use for corset making in general. But here it is. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but there's like a chevron or like herringbone texture to it. And yeah, it's very similar to canvas. So this is what I'm going to use for the base. And then for the outside, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this. I just saw it on Etsy and I was like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And then now that I see it, it's a little too shiny, but I might just do it anyway, just to give my corset a little personality. But yeah, this came in the mail. It's mauve chrysanthemum. Yeah. Let me see if that can focus. There we go. So I ordered them both from the same shop. I'm totally blanking on the shop name, but I will post it in the show notes if I can find it again. But yeah, so it's coming, my materials are slowly but surely coming together, and I'm gathering them and cannot wait to get into that. So, okay, I think that is it for sewing this week. Okay, so moving along, we have a question from the Ask Away thread, which is a segment where you can ask me, there's a thread in the Ravelry group where you can pretty much ask me anything of or relating to the podcast, knitting, spinning, hand-dyeing yarn, sewing, or anything about me in particular, within reason, and I'll do my best to answer it on the podcast or within the group, depending how time sensitive it is. And this week we have a question from Ashley Nutrition. And she wants to know, she says, "Hi KRISTIN, I have a random question that I should probably know the answer to because I own plenty of your yarn, but I don't. When you dye your yarn, do you reskein it? I was listening to the Kino Knits audio podcast the other day, and she was interviewing a dyer who was discussing reskeining versus not. I was curious about what you do. Thanks." Okay, so when I dye yarn, I used to reskein my yarn, which, you know, I have a reskeiner. It's one of those crazy monkey reskeiners. I don't have it's over there, and I'm not going to bring it on the podcast because it's quite large and heavy. But basically what it does, I don't have anything to show you, but I'll show you, like, okay, this isn't my yarn, but it'll give you an idea of skeining versus reskeining. So, okay. So here we have a skein of Vivid yarns. This is not reskeined because it doesn't look like this. So reskeining basically jumbles up the colors for you. Well, first of all, it makes the skein look neat. If it has tangles in it, you know, just organizes all the strands together so they lie flat next to each other. And then it also serves the purpose of just jumbling up the colors in the skein to give you an idea of how the colors will play with each other when knit up, which is when you have, this is actually Mint Rain yarns, and this is, granted, this is self-striping, but the same thing happens when you generally skein up, you know, like speckled yarns or variegated yarns. It just gives you an idea of how the colors will play with each other. But I used to do that, but I don't anymore. Number one, just for the sake of time, because, you know, I have a lot of yarn that I dye up, and if I were to just sit there reskeining every single skein, it would just take forever. And I honestly just kind of like the way that the yarn looks when it's not reskeined. Just, you know, you get to see the way the yarn was hand painted or dyed, and I honestly like the way it looks like that better. Or that's the way I prefer my yarn to look when I, you know, present it out into the world, if that makes any sense. So, but yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do it, or, you know, you don't have to reskein your yarn. You know, it shouldn't be frowned upon if you don't reskein your yarn. It's all preference, you know. I know some people prefer to see the yarn reskeined so they know how the color, or they can get an idea of what the colors are going to look like when knit up. So yeah, but me personally, I prefer not to reskein my yarn. It's an aesthetic. So yeah, so I hope that answers your question. And yes, again, if you would like me to answer a question on the podcast, just leave a question in the Ask Away Ravelry thread. So yeah, that's it. I'm gonna move along to shop update. There will not be a shop update this week on Friday. Normally I have shop updates on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but because it is a holiday weekend, it's going to be Labor Day weekend here in the States. Dennis and I will be out of town, and I will not have time to update the shop. Plus I'm trying to work on a top secret project, trying to get that out of the way. And then, you know, I will resume my normal dyeing schedule the following week. So that will be, the next update will be, looking at my calendar over there, will be September 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that said, I'm gonna move along to the Blather segment where I chat about what's been going on in my life, if you care to stick around. But as I mentioned earlier, I've been quite hooked on a book series, and I totally blame Jacqueline from the Brooklyn Knit Book podcast for getting me hooked on this. She is hosting an Elementalong, where it's a knit along that revolves around this particular book series called the Sweep series. It's a young adult book series, and if I had to liken it to anything, I would liken it to Twilight, but written so much better, and the Vampire Diaries, and maybe even touches of like Harry Potter, but instead of vampires and wizards, you have witches. So yeah, it's a book series about witches, and I've just been really hooked on it. And I will say that
I've been listening to the audiobooks as I've been working, and each audiobook is about 5 hours long, and I've just been burning through the audiobooks, you know, while I'm working. So just 5 hours every day, just burning through them. And they only have 5 books on audio. And I was talking to Jacqueline last night. I'm like, you know, I'm using up all my Audible credits on, you know, these books. It's crazy. She goes, well, they're only 5. So, you know, you're gonna have to read the other like 10. I'm like, great. I actually have to pick up a book and read. So, but that's totally fun because Dennis and I are actually going up to the Cape this weekend. So I'll have some beach reading material. So very much looking forward to that. And, but, you know, if you're into that stuff, highly recommend it. I am going to be joining in on the Elementalong because Jacqueline picked out some really gorgeous patterns for that. So definitely check that out. But yeah, otherwise, as I mentioned, Dennis and I were going to the Cape for Labor Day weekend. And yeah, just enjoying the last couple of remaining days of the summer season. It's going to be, you know, really nice again to get out of the city. I'm gonna bring some knitting with me. Granted, I'm kind of itching, you know, if I, you know, we're gonna have all this time off, I'm gonna miss my sewing machine because I really just want to get some sewing done. But I think I might just, when we get back, I'll take off a couple of days and treat myself to some sewing, because yeah, I think it's time for me to do that. I really miss it. I just feel like I haven't been getting a lot of it in these past few weeks, just, you know, to meet deadlines and what have you. So I'm definitely planning on blocking out some sewing time for myself, if not when we get back the week after or so. So we'll see. But otherwise, yesterday I met up with Jenny from Tiny Paper Foxes was in town. So we, Jacqueline and Tanya from the Knitting Spring podcast and Dana from the Dana Doodle Knits vlog, we all met up and got some tacos and margaritas, and it was just really, really fun. And I have to say, I really miss Jenny. She, if you're not familiar, she is the host or co-host of the Handmade in Woolen podcast that she co-hosts with her husband. They recently just moved out to Vermont, so she came back into the city, so it was really great to see her in person again. And yeah, I miss her already. She's leaving on Friday, but anyway, check out her podcast if you haven't already. And she's, Devin, her husband, is actually joining forces, or has joined forces with Eric from the Sticks Plus Twine podcast. They are starting Rib, which is a magazine for men that knit and people who knit for men. And I think this is the best idea ever. You know, just in the magazine genre. I don't know what happened. It's just a great idea. So really excited for them. Cannot wait for the first issue to come out. I believe it comes out in fall. I have to double check my sources or what have you, but very excited and happy for them that they're doing this, because yeah, there is definitely a gap in the knitting world that needs to be filled for men when it comes to knitting. So excellent idea, guys. You guys are awesome. So that's all I'm gonna say this week. I'm going to end the show here. And until next time, happy knitting.